In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to do this, which is called a family map. And the value of the family map is that it really helps you understand your family, your mother's family, your father's family, and the understanding that comes with this, the enrichment that comes with this, really allows us to have better relationships with our families. I've done this exercise with many of my clients, and you almost immediately see that things start to shift. So this beautiful masterpiece is obviously the final product, and I'm going to show you how to get started right from the beginning. So I'm going to wipe this board right now.
As I'm wiping the board, I just want to let you know that when you do this activity, it's really important that you do it from the perspective of you as a child, ideally between the ages of 7 and 12.
So the first thing we do before we get started with anything else is we're going to take a big sheet of paper and we're going to divide it into 3 parts. They don't have to be exact. We don't need to be perfectionists here. And if you don't have a big piece of paper like an A2 or an A3, then what you can do also is have 3 separate sheets of A4 paper, which you're going to eventually put side to side. So if you're starting on one large piece of paper, we're going to start in the middle third, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to start kind of in the lower half or the lower third of the middle. And we're going to start with you. So I'm going to put my name here, Abdullah. And I'm putting it in blue to signify my gender, that I'm a male, because gender is really important when we start to look at family dynamics. And let's say that I had a sister called Sophie, and she was younger than me. So I'm going to put her here, Sophie. Okay, and I'm putting her in pink and using a circle. You can use whatever shapes and colors you want. And then let's say my dad was called Isaac, or as I found out recently in Arabic is Ishaq. I didn't know that. And let's say that my mom was called Margaret. So let's say this is my immediate family, okay? There's me, my younger sister, Isaac, my dad, and Margaret, my mum. And obviously, if I had any older siblings, they would come before me. So we always do the children in a descending order, starting with the eldest, going down. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do this for your dad's family, and we're going to do it also on this side for your mum's family. Now, I'm going to just do this and fast forward it for you all. You kind of get the gist.
As you're doing this, it's really important to remember that you can just work to the top of your knowledge. That means you don't need to know all the exact details. Just use what you know now.
So let's say that this is my family map. Okay, I'm just going to point out a few things. So here we have my granddad and my grandma. This is obviously not, these aren't correct names here. I'm just making this up. And then let's say I have my dad, who's the youngest, Ishaq. And then we have Majd and Faryal. And on this side, we have the British side, because I am half British. We have Stuart, Sophia, Joseph, James, Judy, Arthur, Timothy, Mary, Margaret. If you have twins in the family, this is how you show twins. Okay, so right next to each other. And then let's say, for example, that Maryam was married before to somebody else. Let's say his name is Muhammad. Then we put him here, to the side of whoever they married, okay? And let's say they had a child, Noura. Now that we've kind of got an idea of who's in the family, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start drawing their relationships. So what were these relationships like between the different members of the family? And I always like to use different colors to kind of see different things visually. It's one of the most beautiful things of the family map. So for example, let's say that the relationship between Ishaq and his wife, so that would be theoretically my mum and my dad. Let's say that that was conflictual. Okay, and we have a key down here. Conflictual is kind of a zigzaggy line. Let's say I had a strong relationship with him. That would be kind of more a thick line. And again, you can do whatever you want. This is just a simple way to kind of categorize things. And then let's say that Margaret's relationship with her daughter is kind of non-existent, so it's a dotted line. So you're going to continue to do things like this for all the members of your family.
Again, as you do this, just remember, use what you already know. If you do want to find out more information, you can always do it later by asking your parents. Most of us have a good enough idea just from the stories that we've heard over the years as we've grown up.
So let's say your family map's starting to look something like this. You've kind of plotted the relationships. You might start to see patterns. For example, okay, that's interesting that, for example, Margaret doesn't really have a good relationship with her daughter. So that would be theoretically, let's say my mum didn't have a good relationship with her daughter. And interestingly, on my dad's side, my grandma also didn't have good relationships with my daughter. So I might be thinking, oh, that's interesting. And I'm not necessarily trying to make any judgments here. I'm just noticing patterns, finding things interesting. Like, for example, on my mum's side, it's interesting that, let's say my hypothetical grandfather, that he doesn't really seem to have strong relationships with anyone except my mom and her twin sister, right? So I'm like, huh, okay, that's interesting. You know, we're not trying to make too much meaning out of anything here. We're just looking at patterns and noticing the patterns and observing them, maybe writing them down. And as we do that, we're going to add other things to this. What we're going to add next is we're going to see kind of who the favorite children in the family were. We call them the golden child, okay? So let's say that I was the golden child here in my family. And I actually forgot to add a relationship in here. So let's say I was the golden child. Let's say both of my parents, I had really strong relationships with them. They really loved me. I could do nothing wrong. And let's say that my dad in his family was the golden child. Yeah? And then let's say my mum in her family maybe was the golden child. And then we start to see patterns. That's so interesting that both my parents were golden children and I was a golden child. Now, that's not necessarily the case with everyone. Again, I'm making this up as I go along. But it'll be interesting to start to see certain patterns, okay? And then what we want to do next is we want to find the black sheeps of the family, okay? Now, the black sheep sometimes can be the same people as the golden child, but sometimes it's not. So let's say that Farial, the oldest here in this family, was the black sheep. I know that doesn't look exactly like a sheep, but you get the point. Let's say in my family, I'm the golden child and the black sheep. So I'm a little bit weird and I stand out, but I'm also everyone's favorite, for example. And then let's say over here, it was my mom's twin, Mary. And maybe there was two in that family. Maybe James was a bit of a black sheep too. Then we're going to go through and we're going to put positive and negative qualities for each and every family member. So again, I like to use different colors. So for example, here for the positives, I'm going to do it in a blue, and the negatives, I'm going to do in a green. Let's say that and you can start with yourself or you can start with anyone else. Let's say that I am charming, intelligent, interesting. And we want to generally aim for about 3. It's not a hard and fast rule. We just aim for around 3 because that gives us good variety. Let's say my negative qualities are sometimes maybe I'm narcissistic, manipulative. Now, obviously, most people are not going to say things like this about themselves, but I really want to show you how deep we're trying to take this, right? And let's say another quality is, a negative quality is I'm jealous. Let's say I get jealous really easily. And then what we want to do is we want to do that exact same thing for every single member of the family. Now, I'm not going to do that here because you kind of get the point, but we want 3 around positive qualities and around 3 negative qualities for each and every person in the family, okay? Because then what we start to notice is we start to notice similarities and patterns between where we're using similar words. So oftentimes, for example, let's say in this family, maybe manipulative is a quality that comes up a lot. So let's say manipulative here and manipulative here. And again, this is just theoretical. So for argument's sake, let's say I see a lot of manipulation on this side. And let's say that I see a lot of interesting on this side. It'll be really, really thought-provoking to look at what shared qualities there are in the family, especially when you start to see a lot of qualities in one family, okay? And we'll kind of come back to that in a minute. But what I will say about that in the moment is when you've done the qualities, a really nice thing to do is to name the family. So let's say, for example, this family, there's a lot of manipulation. So I might call them the manipulative family. I don't know why I'm going for this negative trait, but it exists. Things happen. And this isn't necessarily the ultimate truth, right? But this is your truth based off of what you've experienced. So let's say the dad's family is called the manipulative family. Let's say that this family is called, I don't know, there's, some strong relationships. They seem to focus a lot on me. So maybe this would be the golden child family because my parents were golden children. Again, all hypothetical here because I'm not going to do my actual family map on the World Wide Web. Okay, so let's say this is called the golden child family because my dad, was a golden child and my mum was a golden child. So let's say that's the name of that family. And then let's say this is called maybe the cold family. And I'm only saying the cold family because there's a lot of kind of non-existent relationships in it. And then I'm going to start to look at this and start to think, this is interesting. It's interesting that there's a lot of manipulation here, there's a lot of coldness here. And then I might ask myself, well, what's good about this family? You know, what's beautiful about this family? And again, it will be more balanced because you'll have a balance of positives and negatives. I'm just kind of choosing extremes here to show you how to name the families. But we want to be as honest as we can and as truthful as we can to our own experience, okay? And then one of the last things we're going to do is we're going to add in dates of birth and dates of death. Now, this is typically actually one of the first things people do when they do family maps, but I find that people get bored really quickly if they start with dates. So I always leave them to the end. So let's say I was born in 1995. Again, we're color coding. Let's say that my parents were born around the 1940s, okay? Let's say my younger sister, was born maybe 4 years after me. And then we'll start to fill in dates, and I'll show you why this is important, right? If we find out, for example, that they were born in the 1920s, and you can approximate. You're not going to know everyone's exact date of birth. You're not going to know everyone exactly as they are. This is really just an exercise of imagination and using what you know, okay? Because what you know is good enough, okay? But let's say that we realize, for example, that all of the grandparents were born roughly around the 1920s. That, especially on the British side, is around the time of the First World War. So I might want to put that. I might want to put here First World War. That could say a lot about the family dynamics. Like maybe the relationships with the siblings or the relationships with the children are really non-existent because maybe the dad was fighting, right? Or maybe not because the dad was fighting in the First World War, but maybe by the time that this kid was born in the 1930s, like 1939, maybe Stuart was out fighting in World War II. And maybe that's why he didn't really get to know any of his children, right? And that tells us a lot. And so we want to kind of start to look for patterns with dates. What was going on in the world around that time? How did external events shape those people and those people's lives? And how did that in turn shape your parents? And then one of the last things we want to do is we want to kind of establish the date of death of people, okay? Because this tells us when people were grieving, when things may have been especially stressful in your life. So for example, let's say Maryam passed away in the early 2000s. And let's say the early 2000s, when she passed away, was around the same time that my sister was born. So maybe, maybe the reason that my mom doesn't have such a good relationship with Sophie is because maybe she was really stressed out when when her husband's mum was passing away. Now that isn't necessarily the case, right? And you know your own stories and you can start to see what events coincide. And we don't want to force meaning, but we want to be curious, okay? So that is how you do family maps. It's best if you do it with a professional, but this is a great way to kind of start excavating your family system and looking for little gems and starting to help you discover who your parents are and where they came from and realizing that they're human just the way that you are. If you want more information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a more extended exercise in the description box below. All you have to do is sign up to the newsletter. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.